Hey everyone. Tonight we're traveling to a place where the cold bites deeper than fear, and the ground itself seems hungry for you. Imagine standing in boots that squelch with every step, icy water creeping in until you can't remember what dry feels like. There's a sharp scent in the air, oil, old smoke, and something you wish you didn't recognize. The wind carves right through you, and your coat might as well be made of paper. This isn't just another battlefield. This is the Eastern Front, and almost nobody makes it out the same. So before you bundle up and settle in, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're actually enjoying these journeys, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these late-night stories travel. Now, turn down the lights, maybe open a window or crank up the fan for that extra chill, and get ready to step into the harshest chapter history ever wrote. You step into a night so thick with cold that every breath bites at your lungs, and every sound is muffled by the heavy, endless fog. The air carries the scent of oil, damp earth, something metallic, and a background note you'd rather not name. Somewhere nearby, artillery booms like distant thunder, but here and now, the world is hushed, save for the faint squelch of boots in sticky black mud. You're ankle deep in it, each step tugging at your foot as if the ground itself has grown hungry for company. The sky above is low and endless, an unbroken sheet of gray that presses down on your shoulders, promising that daylight is not just gone, but has forgotten how to return. There's no comfort here, only the damp weight of your uniform, heavy with water and grime. Your coat, issued weeks ago but already betraying you, barely holds back the chill that seeps through every seam. Fingers numb, cheeks raw, you wrap a tattered scarf around your face, breathing in your own stale warmth. It smells like wool, sweat, and fear. Each inhale is a reminder that you are far from home and farther still from safety. All around you, shapes move in the gloom, other soldiers, shivering and silent, their faces shadowed by fatigue. No one speaks unless absolutely necessary. Words are precious, hoarded like the last dry match or the final chunk of bread. Instead, communication happens through gestures, a nod, a glance, the careful pass of a canteen from one cracked, gloved hand to another. Even the youngest among you already look older, their eyes clouded by the things they've seen, the things they hope not to see again. The world here is a tangle of mud, frost, and regret. Somewhere under your coat, lice have made their home, and the constant itch is a quiet torment you can no longer remember life without. Your boots, worn thin, squish with every movement. In the stillness, you can hear the slosh of water trapped between your toes and the inside of the battered leather. Socks, once dry and comforting, are little more than damp rags. You remember, distantly, the sensation of being warm, of putting on fresh clothes in a place that didn't smell of cordite and wet straw. That memory slips further away every day. Beyond the line of trees, the wind whistles, sharp and personal. It slides under collars, down sleeves, and inside gloves, as if determined to leave no patch of skin untouched. Sometimes you imagine the wind is alive, playing tricks, darting from one frozen body to another, whispering warnings you don't want to hear. You've heard stories of people lost to the cold, not through any single event, but through the slow, relentless erosion of will. Here, survival is not about heroics. It's about endurance, about holding on to yourself when the night seems intent on wearing you down to nothing. The ground beneath you is uneven, scored by the passage of tanks and horses, each rut now a trap for the unwary. You can still see the remnants of failed crossings, boots left behind, a rusted mess tin, the occasional lost helmet. Each is a silent monument to the soldiers who moved on or who didn't. You try not to look too closely. The past is best left undisturbed here, where even the mud seems to keep secrets. In the rare moments when you can let your guard down, when the wind drops and the world falls silent, you notice the quiet. It's a strange quiet, not peaceful, but taut, as if the entire forest is holding its breath. The crackle of a distant fire, the far-off murmur of voices, these are the only hints that life continues somewhere, somehow. Otherwise, it's just you and the darkness, huddled together for warmth. You think of home sometimes, of the kitchen light in the early morning, the soft rumble of a train passing in the distance, the taste of real coffee. Those images glow for a moment before the cold snuffs them out. Here there is only now. The chafing of wet wool, the ache in your legs, the dull throb behind your eyes from lack of sleep. There is no future, only the next step forward, the next patch of ground to cross. The night stretches on, endless, until it's impossible to say where you end and the landscape begins. You blend with the gloom, one more shivering, exhausted figure among many, waiting for morning or orders, whichever comes first. The war is out there, somewhere. But tonight, your world is reduced to a narrow strip of slush and the hope that, if you keep moving, you'll make it to sunrise. The Eastern Front is not a place. It's a condition, one that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel clean or warm or truly awake ever again. When the orders first came down and the great engines began to roll east, you could feel the electricity in the air, a collective anticipation that hummed through the ranks. Operation Barbarossa was supposed to be a march, nothing more. The maps in the hands of confident officers were marked with straight arrows and crisp city names. Everyone talked about how quick it would be. By Christmas, they said, you'd be sipping schnapps in the shadow of the Kremlin, the war over before the real winter even had a chance to begin. The propaganda posters promised a lightning campaign, a triumph of modern machinery and discipline over a land painted as backward and unprepared. It's almost funny now, thinking about that optimism. The trains had seemed to stretch on forever, loaded with men and weapons, horses, and endless supplies. Everything engineered for a rapid advance. There were speeches, rations of fresh bread, even a few hesitant songs as the columns crossed the border into the vast unknown. You remember looking at the endless fields and the forests that closed in on the horizon, feeling something in your chest that was equal parts excitement and unease. The first days were surreal, a rush forward, villages passed like afterthoughts, Soviet soldiers scattered, some fleeing, others captured almost before they had a chance to fight. For a moment, it all seemed possible. But almost immediately, the landscape began to fight back in ways no one had described back in training. The roads, if you could call them that, dissolved into thick black rivers of mud with every mile. What looked solid one moment would swallow a truck the next. And the fields, endless and empty, offered no comfort, only more obstacles. Every step forward was paid for with sweat and frustration. The machinery that was supposed to guarantee victory struggled and failed. Tanks, pride of the Wehrmacht, sleek and invincible in the imagination, found themselves helpless in the mire, their engines howling as treads spun uselessly, sinking deeper by the hour. Horses, so many of them, collapsed in harness or simply disappeared beneath the muck, their wide eyes reflecting the confusion of men who had expected to be conquerors, not laborers. Infantry became an army of ditch diggers and salvage teams, pulling, pushing, cursing, and always, always moving, because to stop was to be left behind. And the mud was not like any mud you'd known before. It clung with a stubbornness that felt personal, swallowing boots, rifles, even your hope of staying dry. It seemed to ooze from the very heart of the land, thick and cold, seeping into every fold of your clothing, every crack in your skin. You found yourself wiping grit from your eyes, from the mouth of your canteen, from the bolt of your rifle. And every day it got a little bit harder to believe in the easy victory everyone had talked about. But it wasn't just the ground that worked against you. The forests closed in, the roads choked with abandoned vehicles and horses, the villages often empty, windows staring blankly as you passed. You became acutely aware of how little you understood this place, how the maps and orders failed to capture the reality of an enemy who knew every path and hiding spot, who melted away at the first sign of trouble, only to strike back with uncanny timing. The land itself was an accomplice, and every step deeper made you feel more exposed, more out of place. The initial confidence began to fray. Rations grew stale, socks grew perpetually damp, and the faces around you changed. Jokes became fewer, and every man carried with him the look of someone who realized, perhaps too late, that the stories of an easy march east were just that. It became clear that here, in this foreign, sprawling expanse, speed was impossible, and victory would not be handed out like medals at a parade. Here, every gain was measured not in territory, but in the ability to keep moving at all. By the time the weather started to turn, when the first cold wind sliced through the camp and the sun began to rise late and set too early, any illusion of a quick war was gone. Each step was slower than the last, every mile a reminder that the enemy was not only the soldiers hidden in the forest, but the land itself, vast and indifferent. The dream of Moscow by Christmas faded like the last rays of summer, replaced by the steady, grinding certainty that nothing here would be easy, and every promise of glory was just another thing the mud would try to swallow. The land was the first and most persistent adversary, never sleeping, never relenting, only shifting its tactics with the passing weeks. If you were lucky, you found yourself in a patch of ground firm enough to stand on without losing a boot. Most of the time, luck wasn't on your side. Russian autumn had 1,000 ways to break a person, and it started with the mud, a living thing that wrapped around your legs and clung with the memory of every soldier who had ever tried to cross it. It was a mud unlike anything you'd ever seen. At home, a rainy day meant a bit of inconvenience, maybe a ruined pair of shoes, nothing more. Here, the mud was a force of nature, thick and black, deeper than reason, with a consistency that shifted from glue to quicksand in a single step. Whole convoys vanished in it, trucks and men and horses, leaving behind a trail of broken crates and abandoned wheels. There was no way around it, no clever solution, just the endless slog. Each step a test of will, every meter won at the cost of aching muscles and fraying nerves. And when the mud wasn't sucking at your boots, the swamps took over. Water stood in shallow, icy pools as far as the eye could see, reflecting a sky always thick with clouds. Try to skirt around them, and you found yourself sinking anyway, water trickling over the tops of your boots, freezing your feet, making every movement slow and clumsy. Even the sound was different here, every gunshot muffled, every command swallowed by the reeds and the cold. Autumn on the Eastern Front was not a gentle season. The trees loomed close and silent, birch and pine pressing in along the roads, their branches heavy with a dampness that seeped through even the thickest coat. Rain fell in endless sheets or in icy drizzles that left you soaked to the bone. The cold was not yet sharp enough to freeze the water, but more than enough to gnaw at every exposed inch of skin. Each morning began with the slow, miserable ritual of pulling on wet socks and scraping mud from your pack, and each night ended with a silent prayer that tomorrow might bring even a moment of dryness or warmth. The misery of the landscape went beyond the physical. The body learned to cope, after a fashion, with the constant chill, the cramping in the calves, the blisters that split and refused to heal. It was the slow, grinding exhaustion of the spirit that made this place so dangerous. The forest paths became a labyrinth, impossible to navigate in the darkness. Landmarks blurred into one another. A barn, a solitary tree, a curve in the road, nothing stayed familiar for long. You became lost in more ways than one.
As you trudged onward, the smells changed with the wind. The sharp tang of wet earth, the distant reek of fuel, the sour stench of rot. Sometimes you caught the faintest whiff of smoke or baking bread from a distant village, and it twisted your insides with longing. But mostly, it was the smell of the front: oil, sweat, mud, and the ever-present hint of fear. Every attempt to escape the misery of the land only led to new trials. The mud and the water crept into everything. Your food tasted faintly of earth. Your ammunition grew slick and unreliable. Your gear heavier with each passing day. Your feet became pale, swollen, raw, 1,000 pinpricks of pain whenever you stopped to rest. Blisters burst, skin cracked, infections set in with terrifying speed. Soon, the medics were as busy treating feet as they were patching wounds. Still, the orders never changed. Keep moving, keep advancing, keep pushing deeper into a place that resisted every effort to conquer it. The landscape was more than an obstacle. It was an active enemy, a constant reminder that you did not belong here. Sometimes it felt as if the very land resented your presence, working with the cold, the rain, and the dark to sap your energy and undermine your resolve. When the sun disappeared behind the clouds and the rain fell harder, when the path ahead was nothing but a smear of mud and shadow, you felt small, insignificant, just another figure soon to be swallowed up by the endless Russian autumn. And a land, indifferent and immense, continued its quiet, ruthless campaign, wearing you down long before the next battle even began. Out here, the weather is not a backdrop. It is a living force, unpredictable and merciless, as cunning as any enemy and far less forgiving. The wind moves like a living thing, howling across the open steppe one moment, dropping into perfect, suffocating silence the next. The sky, always shifting, keeps you guessing whether the next hour will bring rain, sleet, or the kind of damp mist that soaks through every layer and settles in your bones. The days are gray and endless, blending into each other, each indistinguishable from the last, marked only by the growing sense of unease that settles into every part of you. One day, the world seems to soften, the mud momentarily firmed by a teasing warmth from a weak sun, only for a chill wind to come roaring in after nightfall, slamming you back into the harsh reality of the Eastern Front. You wake to find the ground stiff and cracked, your blanket stiff with frost, your breath drifting in white plumes that curl and vanish in the air. The cold creeps into your fingers, biting and relentless, until even simple movements, loading a rifle, tightening a bootlace, become exercises in agony. It's a trickster kind of cold, not the sharp, bracing chill you might expect, but a slow, creeping force that seeps into every gap in your clothing, licking at your wrists, your ankles, the back of your neck. The wind slithers through the seams of your coat, pooling icy dampness around your waist, and leaving you shivering long after you've wrapped yourself in every spare scrap of fabric you can find. You try to remember the last time you were truly warm, but the memory slips away,
replaced by the constant awareness that the weather itself is hunting you. The rain, when it comes, is no ordinary rain. It falls for days, turning roads into rivers, fields into lakes. The mud, already a curse, becomes a bottomless pit, swallowing carts, boots, and any hope you had of staying dry. Everything, blankets, bread, maps, turns to pulp. You sleep in dampness, wake to dampness, eat with muddy fingers, drink water that tastes of cold iron and soil. It is a battle you lose over and over, every attempt at comfort washed away by the next downpour. With the cold and the wet come the first sicknesses, subtle at first, then spreading like wildfire through the ranks. A cough here, a fever there, a swelling in the foot that never seems to go down. The medics work quietly, bandaging, dosing, sometimes just offering a word or a rough joke. Trench foot appears, the skin on your feet turning pale and waxy, then red and angry, burning with a pain that radiates up your legs. Lice take up residence in every seam and fold, and soon there isn't a man in the company who doesn't scratch in his sleep, searching for a moment's relief that never quite comes. Your body learns new limits and new vulnerabilities. Fingers crack and bleed from constant damp, noses run endlessly, and skin rubs raw beneath too tight boots and sodden coats. You find yourself more afraid of the chill than of any bullet, because the cold is always there, always waiting for a moment of weakness. Sleep becomes fragmented, shallow, and haunted by dreams of warmth. When you wake, it is with the knowledge that nothing has changed, except perhaps the wind has shifted, the clouds have thickened, the temperature has dropped another precious degree. The officers shout at you to keep moving, to push through, but the weather makes a mockery of their orders. When the ground freezes, it becomes as hard as iron, refusing your shovel when you try to dig a trench, biting at your hands with a kind of cruel intelligence. When it thaws, it turns instantly to slush, undoing hours of work in a heartbeat. Every day is a negotiation with the elements, and the only certainty is that there are no rules, only the relentless, grinding contest between man and nature. By the time the first real snow falls, soft at first, then harder, packing itself around you in glittering drifts, you already know the truth. The weather is not a phase to be endured, not a challenge to be conquered, but a second front, as implacable and resourceful as any enemy. You can fight it, but you will never defeat it. All you can do is adapt, improvise, and hope that you survive just one more night, one more morning, in a world where the sky itself is always plotting your undoing. When the distant thunder of guns finally becomes your world, something inside you shifts. The abstract idea of war, the one you grew up with, the one they wrote about in books, disappears in an instant, replaced by a grinding, immediate chaos that swallows everything else. At first, you stand behind your line, nerves buzzing, heart thudding, the taste of metal at the back of your throat. Then the artillery begins, not in the grand cinematic way you might have imagined, but as a layered, rolling growl that shakes the ground beneath your boots and sends shudders up your spine. The air is split by the sudden shrill wail of shells overhead, the sharp crack of explosions, the splintering of trees. You crouch instinctively, feeling more animal than human, pressed flat against the earth that feels strangely alive beneath your hands. Orders come down, shouted over the roar. Move forward, hold this line, reinforce that gap. The words are muffled by fear, but your body knows what to do. You scramble up, legs already trembling, and run with the others, each step a battle against the instinct to hide, to disappear, to become invisible. Ahead, the world is torn apart, mud and smoke, trees shattered into jagged spears, trenches collapsing, men falling, sometimes silently, sometimes with a sharp cry that echoes too long in your memory. The first time you see someone go down, one of your own, you freeze for half a second. It's not dramatic, it's just a man folding into the mud, eyes wide, mouth open, a shape suddenly motionless in a world that's still moving too fast. You want to help, but someone yells your name, and you're yanked forward again, rifle gripped so tight your knuckles ache. It happens again and again until you stop noticing the faces, focusing only on the next patch of cover, the next command, the next heartbeat.
The enemy is not what you expected. Sometimes you glimpse them, dark shapes flickering between trees, flashes of movement that might be men or might be shadows. They're quick, determined, and terrifyingly persistent. They don't break the way the stories promised. They dig in, shoot back, vanish only to reappear somewhere else. Bullets snap past, too close to track, and you flatten yourself against the ground, praying to become smaller, quieter, invisible. You understand in a single terrifying instant how easy it is to become just another body in the mud. The first time the Soviet infantry charges your position, it's chaos. Orders lost in the noise, shouts drowned by the rising wail of rockets and the staccato beat of machine guns. You fire without aiming, the world narrowed to the sights of your rifle and the thudding in your chest. Figures fall, and for a moment you feel a surge of something, triumph, relief, guilt, all twisted together. Then you notice how many keep coming. For every one that drops, two more appear, swarming out of the trees, undeterred by the carnage around them. Panic spreads through your squad like a spark. Someone drops their weapon. Another slips in the mud and disappears beneath the weight of a fallen comrade. You call for help, but the words stick in your throat, the noise swallowing them before they reach anyone's ears. Suddenly, your world shrinks to the space around you, mud, blood, smoke, the tangled limbs of men you barely know. The only thing that matters is to stay low, keep moving, and hope that the next shell lands anywhere but here. Afterward, when the noise dies down and the enemy pulls back, you take stock of what remains. Some men sit in stunned silence, staring at their hands, their uniforms torn and stained. Others busy themselves with pointless tasks, reloading, repacking, pretending they're still in order to things. The dead are collected quietly, without ceremony, their faces covered, names murmured if anyone remembers them. It's the silence afterward that shakes you the most, the realization that the world goes on, indifferent, as if nothing has happened at all. You feel different, smaller, colder, emptied out. The first loss is a wound that doesn't heal, a weight that settles in your stomach and refuses to move. The fear lingers, growing sharper with every new attack, every time you hear the whistle of shells or the scream of rockets. You learn to move through it, to keep going, because there's nothing else to do. You cling to rituals, cleaning your weapon, counting your ammunition, checking and rechecking the straps on your pack, not because they keep you safe, but because they keep you sane. War, you realize, isn't about banners or parades or heroic speeches. It's about the moments when everything falls apart, when you're left kneeling in the mud, shaking, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. It's about the first time you understand that survival isn't guaranteed, that you're not invincible, that the world can take everything from you in the blink of an eye. And once you know that, nothing is ever the same. Every day on the Eastern Front turns into a relentless contest of patience, ingenuity, and resignation. The rhythm of life isn't marked by the sun or the clock, but by the scrape of mud through mud, the distant thunder of guns, and the rituals that keep your mind from unraveling. The grand dreams of victory have faded into the background. Now it's all about the small victories, the private triumphs over hunger, cold, and fatigue,
that no one will ever sing songs about. Meals, when they come, are less about nourishment and more about survival. What began as well-packed rations, dark bread, thin sausage, a pinch of salt, soon degenerates into a guessing game. What's edible, what isn't, and how to make something out of nothing. There are days when the only thing you have is a slice of stale bread and a cup of water laced with the faint, earthy taste of mud. On better days, someone manages to trade a piece of chocolate or a boiled potato for a favor, a pair of dry socks, or a promise. Food becomes currency, and every crust or crumb is guarded like treasure. You eat quickly, without ceremony, mindful that a moment's distraction could mean losing your meal to a desperate comrade or a sudden shell burst. Cooking is a communal ritual, but never without risks. Fires attract unwanted attention, so meals are prepared quickly, smoke hidden as best as possible. Pots bubble with whatever can be scavenged, bits of horse meat, a shriveled onion, hard beans that never quite soften in the pot. Sometimes the smell is comforting, reminding you of home kitchens and family dinners. More often, it's just a reminder of how far you are from anything familiar. Clothing is another daily battle. The uniforms, crisp and impressive when issued, are no match for the mud, the constant damp, and the gnawing cold. The wool is too thin, the boots stiff and unyielding, and every night you strip off layer after layer of sodden, gritty fabric only to put it all back on in the morning, still wet. Socks are precious. A dry pair is almost mythical. Most men rotate the same 2 pairs, one drying by the fire, one on their feet, both permanently stained. Gloves vanish, scarves are bartered or stolen, and patches multiply as sleeves and knees disintegrate. The resourcefulness among soldiers is limitless. Anything can be traded: a button, a hand-rolled cigarette, even a snippet of news from home. Barter is the law. You quickly learn the value of things no one cared about before: needles and thread, a half-spent candle, a clean rag. A single dry blanket can be worth a week's rations. There's no shame in trade. Survival trumps pride. The stories about stealing from locals or trading with passing supply convoys aren't just rumors. They're part of daily life, and each transaction is as delicate as any negotiation in peacetime. At night, you make your bed wherever you can: a collapsed barn, a shallow ditch, the floor of a half-destroyed hut. The cold creeps in no matter how many layers you wear. Sometimes you sleep in shifts, 3 men pressed together for warmth, one on watch. Lice are constant companions, crawling through seams, biting when you try to rest. You joke about naming them, but the humor is thin and weary. There's no solution, only the slow acceptance that comfort is a memory you carry like a faded photograph. Washing is a luxury, rarely attempted and never fully successful. Water is for drinking, not for cleaning. Sometimes you find a pond or a slow-moving stream and strip down to scrub at your skin, teeth chattering in the wind, knowing you'll be filthy again within the hour. You stop caring after a while, blending into the landscape until you're just another moving shadow streaked with mud. Letters from home become lifelines, fragile slips of hope passed from hand to hand, read until the words blur, then tucked away in breast pockets like charms. Some men write back, pouring their worries and longings onto the page. Others stay silent, afraid of saying too much or not enough, unsure what to tell people who will never understand what it means to live like this. Nobody ever prepared you for this. No training, no book, no parade ground speech. Out here, survival is 1,000 small choices, an endless stream of adjustments, sacrifices, and makeshift solutions. The front strips you down to your essentials, teaching you the art of making do, of finding moments of rest in chaos, of holding on to the smallest things because they're all you have left. Each night, as you lie awake listening to the wind and the distant, irregular sounds of war, you realize that endurance here is not heroism. It's simply refusing to let the land, the cold, and the war take more than they already have.
After the first few weeks, something inside you begins to shift. The rush of adrenaline that once came with every new order, every push forward, fades into something duller, deeper, a kind of heavy persistence that settles into your bones. The word that circles through the camps, scribbled on helmets and whispered in the chill before dawn, is endure. Endure the cold, endure the hunger, endure the confusion and the noise. Endure because there is no other option. It's not bravery in the way you imagined it. There are no grand speeches, no flag waving, no cinematic heroics. There is only the realization that to survive out here is to become part of the landscape, to blend your hopes and fears with the mud and fog and the ceaseless, grinding monotony of life on the front. The philosophy seeps in slowly, one cold morning, one lost comrade, one long night at a time, until it becomes the lens through which you see everything. Endure or vanish. That's all there is. Habits form, not out of comfort, but out of necessity and a deep superstition that comes from living so close to the edge. You start every morning the same way, with a ritualistic check of your boots, your rifle, the contents of your pack. You tap your helmet twice before stepping out of cover, convinced that it helps, though you know it probably doesn't. The men around you invent their own small routines, a pebble kept in a pocket for luck, a scrap of cloth tied around a wrist, the careful way rations are divided and eaten. One man draws a line on his sleeve for every day survived, until his jacket is a tapestry of persistence. Another refuses to eat unless he's facing east, claiming it keeps the bad luck at bay. Conversations drift over time into talk of omens and signs. A fox glimpsed near the trench at dawn is a good sign. A crow perched on a gun barrel means trouble. You learn to read the mood of the weather, the shift in the wind, the way the birds fall silent before an artillery barrage. These little superstitions aren't just games, they're anchors, something to hold on to when the world around you is always threatening to spin apart. Even the most rational men adopt odd habits: a favorite spoon, a poem written inside a coat, a photograph folded and refolded until the edges blur. Stories pass from man to man, half joking, half serious. A lucky button sewn onto a cuff, a piece of shrapnel worn as a charm. It becomes a contest to see who can gather the most tokens against fate, who can weave the tightest shield of habits and talismans against the invisible hands that tip the scales out here. Endurance isn't just about withstanding the cold or pushing through hunger. It becomes a mindset, a way of reducing life to the next step, the next breath, the next shift on watch. You stop thinking about the end of the war or home or even tomorrow. Everything narrows to the smallest possible victories: warm food, dry socks, a letter from home. You count these wins as fiercely as any battle because they're what keep you moving. Those who can't find their own rhythm begin to fade, their spirits as battered as their bodies. It's easy to spot: eyes that don't focus, hands that tremble, the sudden silence where laughter used to be. You do what you can, sharing rations or telling a joke, but everyone knows there's only so much you can give. Some men simply disappear into themselves, lost in memories or fears, becoming shadows in the fog. You learn not to look too closely, because you're afraid you might see yourself. Over time, the act of enduring becomes its own kind of pride. There's a quiet strength in stubbornness, in refusing to be moved by anything short of force. You laugh at things that would have rattled you before,
A boot sucked off by mud, a frozen canteen, a lice-ridden shirt, because what else is there to do? The front has a way of grinding everything down until all that's left is willpower and a few battered superstitions. The hope is not for glory, or even for victory, but for another sunrise, another moment of warmth, another step forward when everything in you wants to stop. Out here, survival becomes the only philosophy. You carry it with you, hidden in your pockets, tucked into your sleeves, etched into the lining of your mind. Endure, the land whispers. Endure, the wind sings as it rattles through the trees. And so you do, day after endless day, because the only other option is to be swallowed by the mud, forgotten by the world. And you're not ready for that, not yet.
The world changes with the first snow. One morning you wake and everything is silent. So quiet it seems unnatural after the long, muddy weeks of autumn. The mud, once an enemy you cursed with every step, is gone, replaced by a frozen crust that cracks underfoot and leaves jagged patterns in the ruts where tanks and boots once sank without a trace. A hush settles over the land, broken only by the faint groan of trees under the weight of new ice and the distant creak of something moving just beyond sight. For a moment, you almost believe the worst is behind you. The ground feels solid, your boots less likely to vanish with each stride. But the relief is brief, an illusion shattered by the true arrival of winter. Cold, like you have never known, steals into every corner of your life, into every seam of your uniform and every thought that dares to linger too long on home. The first frost brings a biting clarity, a sharpness to the air that feels almost pure compared to the fetid damp of the last months. But with each hour, as the sky clouds over and the sun becomes just a weak ghost above the horizon, that purity becomes a threat. The cold is ancient, patient, a living presence that creeps beneath your skin and makes a home in your bones. At first, there's confusion. The same routine, boots scraped clean, coat wrapped tight, hands jammed in pockets, now leaves you shivering, teeth chattering so hard you bite your tongue. The thin wool coat you once cursed for being heavy is now laughably inadequate, as are the stiff leather boots and the cap pulled low over your ears. The cold is indifferent to your efforts, seeping through every barrier, settling into your muscles and your mind until moving at all feels like an act of rebellion against the season itself. Warmth becomes more than a comfort. It is the goal around which your days and nights revolve. You count every dry scrap of clothing, every rag or extra sock, hoarding them with the desperation of someone marooned on a shrinking island. Some soldiers wrap newspaper around their legs for insulation. Others stuff straw into their boots, trading dignity for even a moment's reprieve. Nothing helps for long. Fingers go numb, faces burn with the sting of wind, and you find yourself envying those rare moments when you can huddle near a fire, even if it's just for the minute it takes to boil a handful of snow into a mouthful of water. Soon, frostbite is everywhere. Lips crack and bleed, noses turn white at the tips, and a deep, throbbing ache settles in your joints. The simple act of eating, breaking off a piece of bread, lifting a canteen, becomes a battle against hands that barely respond. Meals freeze before they reach your mouth. Water, when you find it, is a block of ice, requiring you to hack away or melt it over a fire that you pray won't attract unwanted eyes. The landscape transforms too, becoming something more alien with every passing day. The fields are a featureless expanse of white, the forests rimed with frost,
their branches snapping with the sound of gunfire whenever a breeze finds them. The horizon blurs, direction vanishes, and soon even the memory of mud feels like a strange kind of luxury. Every footstep squeaks or crunches in the snow, and every breath you draw is a cloud that disappears almost as quickly as you make it. You notice other changes. The laughter that once circled campfires, bitter and forced though it was, disappears altogether. Conversation shrinks to the essentials. No one wastes energy on words, on stories, on speculation about when relief will come or what the generals are thinking. You are left with silence, broken only by the shuffle of feet and the involuntary gasp when the wind finds a weak spot in your scarf or gloves. The warmth of human contact, 3 men pressed together under a single thin blanket, sharing whatever scraps of heat they can muster, becomes another form of currency. You learn to sleep in shifts, bodies curled together for warmth, always half listening for the sound of danger. Some nights, when the wind rattles the walls of whatever shelter you've managed to find, a ruined barn, a shell of a house, a foxhole, you dream of sunlight, of summer, of waking to a world that is not trying to kill you with its indifference. Winter is not simply a season here. It is a campaign, a siege, and you are its prisoner. Everything soft disappears. No more dry socks, no more fresh bread, no more idle hopes. You begin to understand why the locals carry themselves the way they do. Heads down, eyes narrowed, every movement careful and measured. Out here, you survive by conserving every scrap of warmth, every hint of comfort, every shred of hope. The cold does not care who you are or how bravely you march. It only waits, patient and relentless, for you to stop moving, to let down your guard, to become just one more shape in the endless frozen white. By December, winter ceases to be a novelty or a challenge. It becomes a blockade, a silent siege that never lifts, never relents. The air is so cold it feels sharp, slicing through every layer you pile on, working its way into the narrowest gaps, burrowing under collars, sleeves, and cuffs. The wind comes howling across the steppe, pulling every ounce of warmth from your body until you're left shivering uncontrollably, your jaw aching from the effort of keeping your teeth from rattling. Even when you manage to stop shaking, the chill lingers inside, deep in your marrow, a constant companion that makes you forget what comfort ever felt like. Clothes are now the currency of survival, and everyone's are failing. The regulation wool, already threadbare from months of mud and rain, does nothing to keep out the cold. Coats, if you still have one, grow stiff with ice. Trousers freeze solid overnight, and boots, never meant for this kind of winter, become little more than ice boxes that sap the last of your strength with every step. Some men wrap their feet in pages torn from old newspapers. Others scavenge scraps of burlap or discarded Soviet uniforms, anything to try and keep their toes from turning numb and black. You learn to layer rags and bits of felt wherever you can find them, but it's never enough. Sleep is both a necessity and a danger. Digging in for the night, you burrow into shallow trenches or the ruins of barns, trying to build windbreaks from snow and debris. The ground, once soft with mud, is now iron hard, resisting shovels and numbing fingers. If you manage to doze off, it's never for long. Every few minutes you have to stamp your feet, flex your hands, rub your face, anything to keep blood flowing to the surface. More than once, you wake up to find a finger or toe has gone white, tingling, then burning with a pain that warns of worse to come. The first signs of frostbite are terrifying in their subtlety, a slow theft of feeling that can turn a strong man helpless overnight. It's not just the extremities that suffer. The cold works its way into your lungs, your throat, your teeth. Breathing becomes shallow and cautious, because the air feels like shards of glass with every inhale. Coughs tear through the silence, sometimes turning red at the edges, but there's no help for it. The medics do what they can, but their supplies dwindle and their hands shake just like yours. Each day brings more men hobbling, their boots stuffed with straw, their faces twisted in silent agony. When someone stumbles and doesn't get up, you don't ask questions. You help if you can, or you keep moving, because to stop is to risk joining them. Meals offer little respite. Food arrives as solid blocks, frozen so hard it takes a knife to hack off a piece. Water is ice, bread is stone, and you learn to tuck what you can beneath your arms or inside your shirt, hoping to warm it enough to eat. Fires are rare, dangerous luxuries. Smoke brings shells, and wood is as scarce as hope. When you manage to steal a few moments around a flickering flame, hands outstretched, eyes closed, and fragile bliss, you know it can't last. The cold is always reclaiming you. It's easy to envy the enemy. Soviet soldiers seem to glide through the snow, wrapped in thick padded coats, felt boots, and fur hats. They move with a kind of casual efficiency that makes your own efforts look clumsy by comparison. Some men whisper that the Soviets are born to this, that winter itself is their ally. Watching them from a distance, you can almost believe it. Their sleds skim over the ice. Their skis carve silent paths through the forest. Meanwhile, your company huddles together for warmth, breath freezing in the air, each man dreaming of a pair of real gloves or a single dry blanket. There are moments when the cold brings an eerie clarity. The world is stripped of color and sound, just endless white, the crunch of snow underfoot, and the faint crackle of ice on the wind. You march through this silence, eyes fixed on the back of the man ahead, not daring to let your mind wander. Every step is a triumph of will over nature. Every mile a reminder that the greatest enemy here isn't the Red Army or the next barrage, but the winter itself. And all the while, the sense of blockade grows. You're not just surrounded by an enemy army, you're trapped by the land, hemmed in on every side by forces you can't see or fight. Messages from the rear grow scarce. Supplies trickle in, more rumor than reality. Hope itself seems to freeze and fall away, leaving only the daily struggle to hold on, to make it through another night, another hour, another moment in this winter that shows no sign of ending. A blockade more perfect and absolute than any army could dream of building. Hunger on the Eastern Front is a quiet, persistent ache that starts in the stomach and spreads through every thought, every movement, every corner of your existence. In the early days, food had been something you took for granted. Dry bread, a scrap of sausage, maybe even a boiled potato when luck was on your side. The quartermasters had promised regular deliveries, and there were stories of field kitchens trailing just behind the lines, soup and coffee ready to greet tired men after a day's march. But the world changed faster than those old promises could keep up. The roads vanished under snow or turned to mud, trucks broke down or disappeared entirely, and supply lines, so carefully mapped on paper, crumbled into rumor. Now, rations are measured not in meals, but in memories and scraps. You find yourself dreaming of food more often than you sleep. A crust of bread becomes a treasure, a few grains of sugar a secret to be guarded. Some men squirrel away a lump of chocolate or a crust of bread for days, taking it out only to inhale its scent and remember the feeling of fullness. Cigarettes, once traded freely, become as valuable as gold, sometimes even more, as hunger gnaws at your patience and dignity. The world is divided into those who have food and those who don't. Sometimes desperation leads to silent bargains. A warm pair of socks for half a potato, a cigarette for a scoop of thin soup, a half-melted candy in exchange for a night's guard duty. Every soldier becomes a scavenger, eyes always searching for anything edible, frozen berries clinging to bare bushes, the rare potato missed by villagers, even the bark from trees, scraped and boiled into a bitter, stringy pulp that does little to satisfy, but keeps the hunger at bay for another hour. Mealtime itself becomes ritualized, communal yet tense. When rations arrive, if they arrive, there is a hush as the parcels are divided, each man watching the scale with quiet intensity. Nobody wants to be cheated, but everyone knows that the scales themselves are never truly fair. Sometimes there is soup, thin and gray, ladled from battered pots, filled out with whatever can be found, bits of gristle, unidentifiable roots, even horse meat when a supply animal collapses from exhaustion and can go no further. You tell yourself it tastes sweet, that it's food, that it will keep you moving, but deep down you know it's only the barest echo of real nourishment. The horses fare no better. Brought along in their thousands to haul guns and wagons, they too fall victim to the cold, the hunger, and the endless march. Each day, a few more collapse in the snow, ribs jutting, eyes wide and empty. When it happens, there's no room for sentiment. Knives come out, meat is carved, boiled, shared as quietly as possible. Even the smallest scraps are claimed. Nothing is wasted. You watch your comrades chew in silence, no one mentioning the horse's name, all pretending not to see the collar left behind, half buried in frost. Sometimes a supply truck finally appears on the horizon, battered and caked with ice, and for a moment hope flickers. But hope is fragile here. Trucks break down, get stuck, vanish altogether. The men give them names, Gretel, the widow, the little one, and mourn their loss as if they were friends. You count the trucks and the days between their visits. Gretel hasn't returned in weeks. The widow exploded on a mine. Every loss is a reminder of how thin the lifeline has grown.
When food grows impossibly scarce, discipline frays at the edges. Fights break out over rumors of hidden stores or accusations of theft. Command tries to keep order, but they too are hungry. Letters home become desperate pleas for salami, biscuits, even a pinch of salt. You try not to think about what's happening at the rear, about who might be getting full meals while you scrape frost from the inside of your canteen and chew on leather. The hunger becomes a companion, a rival to the cold. It sits with you at night, gnawing at your belly, reminding you how much of yourself you're willing to trade for a single mouthful. Desperation forces innovation. Men become experts at finding calories anywhere, gnawing at bones until they splinter, boiling up leather, even trading for or stealing from local villagers when the officers aren't looking. Every rumor of a hidden store, a chicken coop, or a forgotten root cellar is investigated, sometimes at great risk. But often the rumors turn up nothing, or worse, lead to disappointment and shame. In the end, hunger is not just a physical trial, but a mental one, whittling away at your sense of self and your hopes for the future. You stop counting the days between meals, focusing instead on the next opportunity, the next mouthful, the next bit of warmth to fill the emptiness. You learn to live with hunger, to carry it like another piece of equipment, always heavy, always there, always waiting for a moment of weakness. And yet, through it all, you keep moving, because the only thing harder than fighting hunger is giving in to it. The machines that once promised power and protection soon become a different kind of threat. At first, you trust them, the tanks and trucks, the armored cars gleaming with confidence, their engines roaring through the early advances. The ground shakes beneath their treads, and for a time you feel invincible, certain that nothing can stand against this rolling wall of iron and fire. But as winter deepens, and the roads vanish beneath drifts of snow and sheets of ice, those same machines turn into something else. Heavy, stubborn, and dangerously unpredictable. There's a peculiar feeling the first time you watch a tank freeze in place. Its engine stutters and then coughs out a final breath. Black smoke curling into the sky. The steel beast that once led the way now sits silent, its crew emerging with red faces, breath billowing in the cold, and their hands shaking from more than just fear. The cold seeps into the metal, making hatches impossible to open, tracks brittle and prone to snapping, oil thickening into sludge. You hear stories of entire companies halted by a single night's frost, forced to dig out engines and hammer at frozen wheels with numb fists.
For infantry, the sight of an immobilized tank is a bitter joke. It blocks the narrow forest roads, trapping convoys, and making every retreat or advance a desperate puzzle. You crawl around it, cursing under your breath, as shells land closer and closer. The enemy always just out of sight, but never out of mind. There are times when the tanks, once a shield, become nothing more than obstacles, iron coffins stranded in the snow, their promise of salvation turned to an ever-present risk. Repairs are rarely simple. You watch the mechanics, bundled in whatever rags they can find, working through the night, hands black with grease, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. Every fix is temporary. You melt snow for water, pour it into boiling radiators, patch broken tracks with wire and frozen rope. Spare parts are a fantasy, so every broken bolt is salvaged from another wreck. Sometimes, desperate for shelter, men huddle inside a dead tank, risking carbon monoxide or enemy fire for a few hours of windless warmth. The Soviets are relentless. They know the roads as well as the weather, and when they strike, the chaos doubles. A tank mired in mud or locked by ice becomes a target. Shells find it quickly, and you pray you're not inside when the fire comes. There's no room for error. One mistake and you're trapped, unable to open the hatch, unable to run. The fear is a quiet, coiling thing that follows you into every machine, every time you squeeze into a cramped compartment, every time you start the engine and hope it catches. As supplies thin, you're forced to abandon more and more equipment, stripping out anything that might be useful before lighting a fire under the engine or packing explosives into the hull. The landscape is littered with these burned-out hulks, silent testimonies to a campaign gone sour. They become landmarks. Turn left at the broken Panzer, someone says, or we're meeting near the third wreck on the road. Even the enemy uses them for cover, snipers hiding among the twisted remains, waiting for a glimpse of movement. Retreat becomes a nightmare. The roads, slick with ice, jam with vehicles that can't move. Men climb over tanks, crawling through mud and snow, desperate to stay ahead of advancing troops or outrun another barrage. There's no turning back. To pause is to risk being caught between the cold, the enemy, and your own broken machinery. The front dissolves into a scattered trail of abandoned vehicles and weary men, the promise of mechanized war lost beneath the weight of a winter no one truly believed in. You learn to measure your hope in small increments. A tank that starts in the morning, a truck that makes it another mile down the road. But with each passing day, the machines that once embodied strength now mark the limits of your world. Iron reminders that on this front,
Even the greatest weapons can betray you, leaving you exposed and alone on a road that grows colder, harder, and more uncertain with every hour. The real war, you begin to realize, is fought not just against the enemy or the land, but against the slow, creeping assaults of sickness and filth. The discomforts that once seemed like minor inconveniences grow, day by day, into torments that dominate your every waking moment. The cold and hunger are relentless, but it is the quiet invasions, parasites, disease, the things that thrive where soldiers are forced to live in close, dirty quarters that grind you down in ways no battle ever could. Lice become your constant companions, an invisible army that never sleeps. They slip through the seams of your uniform, nest in your hair, and lay eggs in every fold of fabric. You scratch until your skin is raw, until blood mixes with the grime under your nails, but it's never enough. Each night, you strip down in whatever shelter you can find, hoping the cold will drive them off, only to find them waiting for you in the morning, hungry and relentless. Some men joke about naming their worst offenders, but the laughter is thin. The itching becomes a background noise in your mind, another rhythm that keeps you awake when sleep is most precious. With the lice come worse things. Trench fever sweeps through the ranks, a sickness that starts with aches and chills, then turns to fire in your bones. The medics do what they can, wrap you in extra blankets, offer a ration of spirits if there's any left, but mostly you're told to rest, to wait it out, to hope that the fever breaks before it takes too much from you. In the overcrowded shelters, coughs and sneezes echo like warning bells, and every sniffle is met with wary glances. Clean water, once taken for granted, is now a rare prize. Melting snow is risky. The water picks up the taint of whatever lies beneath the white surface, rotting animals, refuse, even the remains of men lost in the last retreat. You learn to strain your water through cloth, to boil when you can, but there's never enough fuel or time. Dysentery stalks the camp, turning strong men weak in a matter of days. You learn to recognize the hollow eyes, the tight grip on the stomach, the way men stagger off behind the lines, praying for privacy, praying for relief. When the symptoms strike, there's no dignity left. The medics try to keep up, handing out powders, mixing makeshift cures, but often it's just a matter of waiting, of watching and hoping you'll recover before the next attack comes. Fleas and other insects thrive in the straw you use for bedding, in the folds of your blanket, in every untouched corner where filth accumulates. Larvae wriggle in the damp, dark places, and you become obsessed with keeping your space clean, knowing it's a losing battle. Some men burn their shirts at night, holding them over open flames, hoping to kill whatever lives inside, but the reprieve never lasts long. Everything smells wrong: smoke and sweat, oil and rot, the heavy, sickly sweetness of unwashed bodies crammed together for warmth. You come to dread the scent of infection, a wound that's turned dark and swollen, a breath that smells sour, a cough that doesn't stop. The doctors do what they can with what little they have: strips of bandage, boiled water, hope. But supplies run low, and the most basic medicines are treasures hoarded for only the most desperate cases. Fear of sickness is its own kind of torment. You watch for signs in yourself and others: shivering hands, a feverish flush, a limp that wasn't there before. Some men become withdrawn, wary of touch, guarding their food and water with paranoid intensity. Others become reckless, as if daring illness to finish what the war has started. Hope is a fragile thing here. Even small injuries, cuts, blisters, a sore tooth, can become life-changing. The infection sets in, and with it comes a new round of suffering, new prayers for help that may never come. You keep moving,
Keep scratching, keep hoping that the next mouthful of water or bite of bread won't turn against you. The enemy out there is dangerous, but it is the invisible foes within your own camp, the sickness, the filth, the constant parade of parasites and infections that break you down piece by piece, leaving you changed in ways that linger long after the sound of gunfire fades. There comes a point on the Eastern Front when the very idea of the line dissolves, where the maps become meaningless, the markers lost beneath new snow, and the certainty of friend or foe vanishes into fog and darkness. You find yourself living in a state of constant shifting uncertainty, the ground beneath your feet more temporary than any shelter, the direction of danger always changing, never clear.
In the early days, orders came with precision. Hold this trench, seize that ridge, advance 2 kilometers at dawn. But as the weeks grind on, those commands are replaced by vague directions and desperate improvisation. The front isn't a line, but a zone, wide and unpredictable, crisscrossed with narrow trails and faint paths that are here today and gone tomorrow. Villages taken one day are lost the next. The enemy, always closer than you think, seems to slip through the woods and across the frozen fields at will, leaving you wondering if the shapes you glimpse ahead are Russian patrols or men from your own battered company. Every movement becomes a risk. The landscape itself conspires to hide and confuse. A patch of birch trees looks like every other. A burned-out house becomes your only reference point until you realize, hours later, you've been circling the same ruin all day. You rely on rumors as much as reports, stories passed from one exhausted squad to another about which direction is safe, where the enemy might be hiding, which roads have turned into killing zones. Nobody trusts the maps anymore. They're relics of a different war, a different world. At night, the world shrinks to the reach of your lantern or the flicker of a dying fire. You post sentries, whispering instructions, hoping they'll remember the new passwords and not mistake your own men for the enemy. The darkness is alive with sounds, crunching snow, distant shouts, the sudden snap of a twig that set your nerves on edge. Everyone is jumpy. Fingers twitch on triggers, and too often, a flash of movement ends with a shot fired out of panic, only to discover with horror that the target was a lost comrade, not a foe. Supplies and reinforcements vanish into this maze, sometimes never seen again. Columns set out with orders and disappear into the white, messages lost or garbled. You wait for relief, for the next company to arrive, but time stretches out, and you begin to suspect you're more isolated than anyone knows. The radios crackle with static, and sometimes there's no word from higher command for days. You cling to whatever bits of news make it through. A whispered report that the enemy has withdrawn, a rumor that the lines have shifted again, a murmur that reinforcements are coming soon, always soon. The uncertainty seeps into everything. You second-guess each decision, each movement, each figure in the distance. Paranoia spreads. You see enemies behind every tree, in every shadow. The urge to dig in, to find something solid and hold it, fights against the necessity to move, to avoid encirclement or sudden attack. Some men become reckless, convinced that movement is safety. Others freeze, unwilling to step into a world where even the ground seems untrustworthy. And yet, you keep going, drawn forward by orders, by habit, by the simple refusal to stop. You travel by day and by night, changing course at a moment's notice, sleeping where you can, always half-dressed, half awake. The difference between the front and the rear,
between the enemy and your own blurs until you are just one more shadow in a landscape of ghosts, moving because not moving is the only real danger left. In this world without borders, every day is a gamble, every direction a guess. The old markers of safety and certainty, familiar faces, known positions, the assurance of support are gone. All that remains is the endless uncertainty, the feeling that at any moment the ground might shift beneath your feet, and nothing you know will matter. It is not the fighting itself that wears you down, but the not knowing where the enemy is, where you belong, or if the dawn will bring you closer to safety or simply deeper into the unknown. When the nights grow longest and the world outside your shelter fades to a single shade of darkness, memory becomes both a refuge and a torment. There are moments between alarms and patrols, with your back pressed to a wall or curled beside another shivering soldier, when you let your mind wander back to the places and people you left behind. In these silent hours, the front seems impossibly distant from the kitchens, the gardens, the soft lamplight of home, and you wonder how such a gap could ever be bridged. Letters become the only tether connecting you to that other life. When the mail arrives, it's an event as powerful as any ration drop, a flutter of paper that brings color to your gray world. You see men transform at the sight of their names, shoulders straightening, eyes brightening, even if only for a moment. Each envelope is handled with reverence, fingers tracing the handwriting, the scent of home sometimes still clinging faintly to the page. The words inside are often simple: news of the harvest, the health of a brother, a new neighbor, the rising cost of coal. But they are treasures. They remind you that you exist beyond this place, that you are missed, that there is a world where mud and gunfire are not the only realities.
Some men read their letters aloud, passing the time and sharing laughter, while others guard them fiercely, reading and rereading in private until the paper frays at the edges. A single sentence from a loved one can become a mantra, repeated on long marches or whispered before sleep. Come home soon. We pray for you every night. The garden is blooming again. These words are a bridge, a reminder that you are not only a soldier, but a son, a brother, a husband, someone who once had a life untouched by the cold logic of war. Writing back is harder. You find yourself struggling to find the right words, to say enough without saying too much. You don't want to worry them with details about hunger, sickness, or the endless uncertainty that colors every day. You lie sometimes, promising you are warm, that you've been eating well, that you're with friends and in good spirits. The paper absorbs your longing, your loneliness, your hope that this war will end and you'll step back into the light of an ordinary day. You fold the letter carefully, knowing it might be weeks before it reaches its destination, if it reaches at all. Some letters never arrive. You see the disappointment etched into faces, the worry that grows with every missed post, every rumor that the mail has been lost or captured or burned in a supply truck stranded in the snow. Men start to believe in omens. A letter arriving late means bad news. An envelope opened by mistake is a sign of danger. Hope becomes a delicate thing, easily bruised. In the absence of new messages, memory takes over. The smallest details, how bread smelled baking in the morning, the sound of a door opening, the warmth of familiar hands replay themselves in your mind, sometimes so vividly you can almost reach out and touch them. But always, you are pulled back to the present by a shout, the crack of distant gunfire, or the ache of cold settling deeper into your bones. You learn to live on these scraps of connection, to treasure every word, every faded photograph, every childish drawing tucked between the pages. They are not just comforts, but lifelines, reminders that you are more than this moment, more than this uniform, more than this frozen, uncertain place. The letters and the memories become a quiet defiance against despair, a small, stubborn hope that carries you through the long, empty hours until the world beyond the front feels, for just a moment, close enough to touch.
Winter on the Eastern Front is no longer just a season. It becomes a rival, cunning and unyielding, pressing closer each day, testing your resolve in ways you never imagined. The cold intensifies, growing sharper with every breath, slicing through your clothing and burrowing beneath your skin until you feel hollowed out by frost. The routine tasks of survival, tying boots, eating, even speaking, become arduous. Fingers move clumsily, lips split and bleed, and every movement is haunted by the fear that the cold has claimed another part of you that may never come back. There is a peculiar stillness that settles over the landscape, a silence born not of peace, but of endurance. Every sound carries, footsteps crunching on snow, the distant creak of wagons, the hollow tap of icicles snapping in the wind. The sky is the pale, oppressive gray of perpetual twilight, and the horizon is erased by drifts of snow that reshape the world anew each morning. It's as if time itself is slowed, the days blurring into each other, marked only by the steady, inescapable march of winter's deepening grip. You watch the men around you diminish, their faces drawn and eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. The warmest clothing you have is laughably thin, the wool threadbare and mended, the boots heavy but never dry. Everything freezes, water in your canteen, the oil in your rifle, the sweat on your brow as you trudge from shelter to shelter. The smallest injury, an open blister, a cracked knuckle, becomes a vulnerability, and you wrap every wound not to heal, but to shield against the cold that sniffs out weakness with predatory precision. Against this, the enemy seems almost at home. Soviet soldiers are wrapped in thick quilted jackets and padded trousers, felt boots that keep their feet insulated from the ice, fur hats that shield their faces from the wind. You watch them from across the lines, moving with a strange, deliberate ease, their movements lacking the hesitation that plagues your own. Their camps radiate a kind of grim competence, smoke rising from hidden stoves, shelters dug deep into the earth and insulated against the worst of the weather. Their horses are blanketed, their sentries rotate in and out with methodical discipline, and even in the worst weather, they seem able to function as a single practiced body.
It is not envy that takes root, but something deeper, an awareness that you are outmatched not just in weapons or numbers, but in preparation for the very climate you now inhabit. Rumors swirl of entire patrols lost to frostbite, of sentries found stiff and silent at dawn, hands frozen to rifles, eyes wide open to the endless gray. You hear stories of men falling asleep at their posts, never to wake, the cold as lethal as any bullet. The wind becomes a thing you fear, a force that erases footprints, hides dangers, and whispers through the broken buildings and battered trucks like the voice of the front itself. Efforts to adapt are desperate and often futile. Blankets are cut and sewn into makeshift scarves, newspapers stuffed into boots, anything to fight the deepening chill. Some men trade what little they have for extra layers, an extra shirt for a week's rations,
a pair of socks for a promise. But no matter how much you add, it is never enough. The cold gets in everywhere, as if it's hunting you personally, learning your habits and waiting for the moment you let your guard down. Rations freeze solid, boots grow stiff, and fires become both a necessity and a risk. Every moment of warmth is temporary. A mug of boiled water, a few minutes beside a hidden stove. You mark your days by these small mercies, measuring the passage of time in the fleeting presence of heat. Still, nothing softens the edge of winter. You wake each morning wondering who has been lost to the cold overnight, which faces have vanished into the white, which voices are now only echoes in the wind. This winter is not simply weather. It is a presence, an adversary that demands respect and takes what it wants. You find yourself counting hours, then minutes, then seconds, clinging to anything that might shield you from its reach. You become a shadow in a world of ice, breathing shallowly, moving carefully, always watching the horizon for the first hint of light, praying that dawn will bring not only another day, but a reason to keep fighting against an enemy that cannot be beaten, only endured. The turn comes quietly at first, almost hidden beneath the monotony of cold and exhaustion. Rumors drift in with the wind, of stronger Soviet positions, of fresh divisions moving up from the east, of attacks that seem better planned, more relentless, more precise. You notice it not with grand announcements or sudden catastrophe, but in the subtle shifts of fear and urgency that run through the ranks. The enemy is no longer merely enduring, he is gathering, growing, preparing to strike back. The first attacks feel different, more coordinated, the artillery heavier, the barrages longer and more accurate. Soviet soldiers appear in greater numbers, moving with a discipline and confidence that unsettles even the most hardened veterans. They attack in waves, the first line probing for weakness, the next flooding through gaps with a force that feels unstoppable. Where before you could count on the chaos of battle to scatter their ranks, now they move as if guided by a single mind, flanking, encircling, never letting up. Nighttime becomes the most dangerous. Soviet mortars fall like hail, their launches timed to disrupt rest and scatter the nerve. Trenches and shelters that once felt safe are now vulnerable, targets for sudden bursts of machine gun fire or creeping squads of sappers and scouts. You hear the distinctive whoosh of Katyusha rockets, their wild, rising shriek slicing the night before impact. The landscape is shredded, familiar landmarks erased overnight. Men vanish in the dark, patrols swallowed up by the forest, relief columns ambushed or turned back by mines and sudden attacks. It is not just the brute force that marks this new phase, but the enemy's cunning. Soviet units adapt quickly, using the terrain and weather to their advantage. When you dig in, they flank. When you retreat, they harry you, always pressing, never giving you time to rest. Their equipment grows more formidable. New tanks with sloped armor that deflects your shots. Mobile artillery that appears and disappears like ghosts. Winter camouflage that turns them invisible against the snow. They field automatic weapons in growing numbers, storming trenches with a fury that seems to multiply in the cold. But it is not only the regular army you face now. There is a new, more elusive enemy, the partisans. They strike from behind the lines, sabotaging railways and bridges, cutting telephone wires, ambushing convoys at dawn, and vanishing into the forests by dusk. Supplies disappear, columns are ambushed, and you find yourself looking over your shoulder as often as you scan the horizon ahead. Sometimes you come upon the aftermath of a partisan raid, a burned truck, a wrecked train, the wreckage frozen in time under a dusting of snow. Each loss tightens the sense of siege, the suspicion that the enemy is everywhere, that the very land is conspiring with him to bleed you dry. The effect on morale is immediate and corrosive. You see it in the faces of your comrades, the way voices drop when they speak of the enemy, the way hands shake, not only from cold, but from nerves stretched to the breaking point. Command struggles to keep order, issuing new plans, new orders. But the rhythm of the front is broken, the certainty of yesterday's tactics swept away by the force of this renewed and ruthless foe. The war changes, becoming not a matter of holding ground, but of trying to survive each day, to escape encirclement, to find a position that can be held for even a single night. The front is no longer yours to define. It shifts and surges at the enemy's will, each attack driving you further back, each ambush a reminder that there is no safe haven, no solid line, only a world shrinking around you, one shell crater, one ruined village at a time. Through it all, a sense of inevitability grows, as if the land itself has chosen its side, and you are now fighting against both the weather and a foe who has learned, adapted, and will not stop. You move in darkness, in silence, caught between a winter that will not yield and an enemy that grows more relentless with every passing day, feeling the tide of the war turn against you, not with a roar, but with the slow, inexorable pressure of a storm that will not be denied. The enemy you can't see becomes the one you fear the most. The forest, once merely an obstacle, an endless sweep of trees and tangled underbrush, now grows alive with unseen danger. You move through its shadowed corridors with a constant ache of anxiety, every crack of a branch, every sudden rustle making your heart leap. The stories are everywhere, patrols ambushed and never returning, trains derailed in the night, bridges collapsing beneath supply columns, convoys vanishing as if the woods themselves had swallowed them whole. Partisan warfare is nothing like the battles you trained for. There are no set lines, no clarion calls or coordinated charges, only the knowledge that the land you walk on might at any moment turn against you. The partisans are ghosts, striking when least expected, melting away before you can even return fire. They know the land intimately, moving through snow-laden thickets and frozen swamps with a quiet confidence that you will never match. For every partisan you glimpse, there are dozens you never see. Sabotage is constant, and it is more than a threat, it is a daily reality. The tracks you march along may be mined, the food and fuel you depend on may never arrive. Every length of railway, every telegraph line, every narrow bridge is a potential target. Sometimes you find evidence, a section of rail twisted and blackened, a sentry's post empty but for a boot, a crude sign left nailed to a tree in Cyrillic, half warning, half mockery. Each new loss chips away at your sense of control, turning confidence into suspicion, suspicion into dread. You come to fear the forest in a new way. By day, it is a labyrinth, offering cover for those who hunt you and concealing dangers you can't predict. At night, it becomes something worse, a place of absolute darkness, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. You whisper to each other about the eyes that watch from the tree line, the footsteps that seem to follow but are never found. Sentries double-check their rifles, hands trembling in the cold, faces pale as they strain to peer through the gloom. Fatigue becomes your constant companion. Sleep is broken by alarms, by rumors of another attack, by the shriek of sabotage in the distance. No one rests easy. You catch yourself flinching at every noise, scanning every shadow for movement, mind playing tricks in the half-light. Men grow withdrawn, voices dropping to whispers, laughter fading into silence. You see it in the eyes of your comrades, the haunted, hollow stare of those who know they are being hunted by a force that never tires, never shows its face. Psychological exhaustion seeps into everything. Command responds with more patrols, more reprisals. But each effort only seems to make the forest more hostile. Villages that once offered a chance at rest now feel unsafe. Eyes watching from shuttered windows. Children slipping away at your approach. Trust evaporates. The isolation grows until even your own men start to seem like strangers, each consumed by his own private fears. The landscape itself turns traitor. The roads become death traps. The forests a world apart, impenetrable and full of secrets. You move in groups, never alone, rifles at the ready. But it changes nothing. The partisans remain shadows, always there, never caught, always waiting. The land whispers their presence in every gust of wind, every snapping twig. Each day that passes in this war of shadows, you feel your strength slipping, the will to fight thinning beneath the relentless pressure of a battle you can't see and can never hope to win on your own terms. You learn that on this front, the enemy isn't always a uniformed soldier, isn't always even visible. Sometimes the forest itself is the enemy, and you are just another trespasser, lost beneath its ancient, indifferent canopy, waiting for dawn, for rescue, or for whatever comes next out of the darkness.
The villages scattered across the vastness of the front are both shelter and snare, places where the war seeps into every stone and shadow, and where nothing is ever as it seems. As you march down rutted roads lined with frozen fences, through settlements half hidden by drifting snow or fields of brittle stubble, you feel the eyes of the local people on you, watchful, wary, never revealing their true thoughts. These encounters are a test, and no one tells you the rules. At first, you try to make sense of the civilians. Their faces are closed, their speech guarded, their gestures hard to read. Sometimes you find old women sweeping snow from the threshold, children staring in silence from behind cracked windows, men standing in tight groups, arms crossed, expressions impossible to decipher. You enter a house searching for warmth, food, or a place to sleep, and are met with quiet compliance or sudden, brittle defiance. A loaf of bread is offered, but is it generosity or fear? A cup of water passed in silence, gratitude or resignation? You learn quickly that every gesture may hide another meaning. Suspicion runs both ways. To you, every villager is a possible partisan, every barn a hiding place, every sudden movement a signal. But for them, you are the invader, the disruptor of fragile routines, the reason for hunger and loss. Some try to curry favor, offering goods or information in exchange for protection or leniency. Others retreat into sullen silence, refusing to meet your eyes or answer your questions. You sense stories passing between them, news of battles, rumors of atrocities, warnings whispered from door to door after you leave. Life in these villages is its own kind of war. The civilians are trapped between armies, forced to choose between cooperation and resistance, between survival and pride. One day, your company might be welcomed with cautious hospitality. The next, the mood shifts, and you find nothing but locked doors and shuttered windows. The line between friend and foe blurs, and you begin to wonder if there is any line at all. The tragedies of the front are not confined to the soldiers. Houses are burned for shelter or out of spite, livestock slaughtered to feed hungry men, family heirlooms traded away or stolen, all traces of normalcy washed away by the tides of war. Sometimes you come upon a village abandoned in haste, belongings scattered in the snow, a dog barking at empty air. Other times you witness the aftermath of retribution, fields trampled, wells fouled, barns smoldering, the cost of defiance or the suspicion of aiding the enemy written in scars across the landscape.
You watch the impact of war on these people, their eyes hollow with fatigue, the children growing silent and wild, the elders retreating into memory. Grief is everywhere, disguised as stoicism or anger or numb routine. You hear, sometimes, the wail of mourning after a raid, or the quiet shuffle of those tending graves at the edge of the village. Sometimes a villager offers a prayer or a warning, their words heavy with meaning you can only guess at. You understand at last that you are only passing through their lives, a shadow among shadows. And whatever you suffer, they endure more quietly and for longer. Trust is fleeting, hard-won and easily lost. Some nights a family risks much to share their fire or a bit of soup, and you sit together in uneasy silence, each listening for the sounds of war outside. Other nights you sleep with your back to the wall, weapon close, knowing the danger may come not from the front, but from the village behind you. The boundaries between invader and victim, helper and enemy dissolve with every new dawn, leaving only a tangle of fear, misunderstanding, and the simple aching desire to see an end to the endless march of violence. War in the villages is not measured in territory gained or lost, but in the daily negotiations for survival, the silent bargains struck in the cold. Here, among people whose language you barely understand, whose grief you only glimpse, you come to see the front as something broader and deeper than lines on a map. You leave every settlement changed, a little less sure of who you are, a little more aware that every uniform, friend or foe, can mean hope or ruin, depending only on which door you knock and which eyes are watching from behind the curtain. The further you go, the more you feel yourself unraveling, not in one dramatic instant, but slowly, subtly, over endless days and nights. At first, you cling to rules and routines, to the belief that your principles will survive whatever the front throws at you. But the strain is constant, grinding away at your resolve. It's not just the hunger, the cold, or the fatigue. It's the sense that the boundaries of right and wrong have become blurred, washed out by the gray expanse of endless struggle. You see it in yourself and in the faces of those around you. There's a hardness that wasn't there before, a reluctance to look too closely at your own reflection, a hesitation before meeting another's eyes. Orders come down that would have shocked you weeks ago. Burn a barn, interrogate a prisoner, take what you need and leave nothing behind. The war has a logic of its own, one that makes mercy seem like weakness and survival the only virtue that matters. The first time you witness real cruelty, it doesn't seem real at all. Maybe it's a beating, a threat, a moment of rage directed at a captive or a villager who hesitates too long. You stand by, watching, telling yourself it isn't your concern, that you're only following orders, that this is the way things are now. Afterward, the memory gnaws at you, but the next time it's easier to look away, to keep your silence, to let the line between what's necessary and what's right slip a little further. Desperation breeds acts you never thought possible. There are moments when hunger or fear makes you take things from others without asking, moments when you justify harshness because you believe it will keep you alive.
You watch your comrades make similar choices. Some retreat into themselves, growing cold and distant, while others embrace a kind of reckless cruelty, laughing too loudly at things that aren't funny, boasting of deeds they would have hidden before. There is an erosion of trust, not just in others, but in yourself. You question your own motives, wonder if the person you were before the war would recognize the person you are becoming. Small acts of kindness feel rare and dangerous, helping a civilian, sparing a prisoner, sharing a last crust of bread. Every decision is fraught with doubt, every encounter colored by suspicion. You begin to move through the world with a sense of detachment, as if watching yourself from a distance, unable or unwilling to intervene. The land reflects your inner turmoil. Villages smolder in the wake of battle. Fields are left trampled and barren. The snow stained and littered with the remnants of desperate acts. The war has stripped away the usual protections, laws, customs, even shame, leaving only the bare urge to survive at any cost. Sometimes, in rare moments of quiet, you wonder if anything can be reclaimed when this is over, or if some part of you is being left behind with every mile you march. You see the toll in others too, men who once joked and sang, now silent, eyes hollowed out by what they've seen and done. Laughter comes sharp and bitter, if at all, and camaraderie is tinged with something darker, an unspoken pact not to speak of certain things. You try to remember what it felt like to hope, to believe in victory or homecoming, but those ideas seem distant, almost childish. The present is all-consuming, a narrow tunnel through which you keep moving, head down, heart armored against regret.
Yet, somewhere, buried deep, a sense of loss lingers. You know you are changing, that the front is taking pieces of you and those around you, piece by piece, day by day. You wonder how much more you can lose before you become as cold and indifferent as the winter itself, or if some part of you will remain untouched, waiting to be reclaimed when the world turns warm again. Until then, you keep going, driven less by belief than by momentum, clinging to whatever scraps of self remain, and hoping that someday you will find your way back from the edge. The city emerges on the horizon, not as a place, but as a jagged silhouette. Smokestacks and crumbling towers, a chaos of brick and concrete that swallows the sky. Stalingrad isn't just another objective on the map. It feels like entering the mouth of something ancient and unforgiving. As you approach, the world narrows. The vastness of the steppe gives way to broken streets, the open sky replaced by a ladderwork of beams and shattered glass. The city itself is alive in a new, hostile way, every ruined corner bristling with threat, every pile of rubble hiding 100 secrets. You step into the ruins and find a place that doesn't sleep. Gunfire echoes off crumbling walls, masking the true source and direction of danger. The air smells of ash, burned oil, and something sweetly metallic that lingers in your throat. Smoke drifts endlessly, turning the sun into a dull red eye that barely illuminates the shattered boulevards. Every building is both fortress and grave. Every street a maze of collapsed facades, twisted rebar, and hidden trenches. Urban warfare is a new kind of nightmare. In the countryside, you could see your enemy, judge the distance, move with the land. Here, you fight for stairwells, for single rooms, for half-ruined cellars where the enemy might be lurking just meters away, separated by nothing but a thin, bullet-riddled wall. Floors become front lines, each level contested, one held by your squad, another by the Soviets, a third collapsing between you both, filled with dust and bodies. You crawl through basements and leap across gaping holes in upper stories, always tense, always listening for the scrape of boots or the creak of broken boards. Grenades and machine pistols become your closest allies.
The battles are sudden and brutal, over in seconds, then replaced by an eerie silence as you wait for the next assault. Sometimes the enemy is so close you can hear them breathing, whispering to each other on the other side of the darkness. Sometimes you wait for hours in the cold shadow of a ruined stairwell, barely daring to move, every nerve stretched to the breaking point. Night offers no respite. The city is haunted by shadows, snipers who vanish as quickly as they appear, patrols lost in labyrinths of rubble, the constant fear of being cut off from your unit. You mark the hours by the dull thud of distant artillery and the sharp crack of rifles echoing through empty streets. Shells fall at random, turning entire blocks into smoking craters, and the danger is as likely to come from above or below as from ahead. Rats move through the debris in swarms, as hungry as the men trapped among them. Supplies are never enough. Ammunition is hoarded. Food is whatever can be scrounged from abandoned stores or the shattered homes of people who once lived here. Water comes from melted snow or the grimy runoff that pools in bombed-out courtyards. You learn to move quietly, to trust your instincts, to look for movement in the windows and behind piles of rubble. Every step is a risk, every moment of rest stolen between alarms. There are moments, fleeting, hallucinatory, when you catch glimpses of the life that once filled this city. A child's toy in the dust, wallpaper scorched but still showing flowers, a cracked teapot on a windowsill. These fragments seem impossibly fragile in the face of so much destruction, but they remind you that this was once a place of families, not just soldiers. In Stalingrad, there are no clear victories, only survival. The battle is measured in meters, in hours, in the number of men left standing at the end of each day. You lose track of how many times a building has changed hands, how many comrades have vanished in the smoke, how many times you've seen the same broken statue as you scurry from one shelter to another. You are trapped in a world of endless gray, where every shadow might be a threat, every silence a prelude to violence. By the end, the city feels less like a battlefield and more like a vast open wound, a place where the old rules no longer apply, where the past and the future are buried beneath the rubble, and only the present, raw and immediate, remains. You cling to whatever keeps you moving, a word of encouragement from a friend, a ration shared, a fleeting memory of home. Stalingrad becomes its own universe, a place that remakes everyone who passes through, leaving them changed in ways that only the city itself can understand. Every step through the ruins is a wager with fate. There is no rhythm here, no clear direction, only the endless, shifting battle for every meter of shattered ground. The city is a maze of rubble and fire, streets transformed into twisted canyons where walls lean at impossible angles and glass glitters underfoot like frost. At dawn, at dusk, in the dead hours between, you move as quietly as possible, weapon held tight, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, always braced for the sudden crack of a rifle or the echoing crash of debris. Survival in this urban wasteland demands a new set of instincts. The open ground you once crossed at a run now looks impossibly wide, each crossing a desperate dash between piles of broken masonry, each pause behind cover a moment to listen for footsteps, the click of a safety, the faint murmur of voices beyond the next doorway. The Soviets are everywhere and nowhere, moving through tunnels, slipping across roofs, hidden in the ruins of apartments and cellars that you cleared only hours before. You quickly learn that you cannot trust what you see. Positions change with the hour, control is always uncertain, and what's safe now may become a trap the next time you pass. The tactics are brutal and improvisational. Barricades rise from wrecked carts and splintered doors. Windows are bricked up with sandbags, furniture, anything that offers protection. You fight for stairwells, for corners, for doorways with clear lines of sight. Grenades become more valuable than bullets, thrown through holes in the floor, bounced off staircases, rolled down corridors where the enemy might be waiting. Every room taken is a tiny victory, every building held a relief, every narrow alley an opportunity or an ambush, depending on who finds it first. Communication is by necessity fast and simple. A shout, a whistle, the slap of boots on stone. Orders come in fragments. Hold here, push up, cover the left. You speak in whispers or not at all, afraid that the wrong sound might bring a rain of grenades or the attention of a sniper hidden among the ruins. The city amplifies every noise. Sometimes a dropped helmet echoes through the empty streets like a signal flare.
Rest comes rarely, and when it does, it's amid the same destruction you fight through by day. You sleep in corners, curled beside broken walls, using rubble for a pillow, the sound of distant gunfire and falling masonry your lullaby. There is no true comfort, only brief moments of stillness before the next attack begins. Hunger and thirst grow constant, rations dwindling, water scarce, every meal an exercise in gratitude and guilt. The dust gets everywhere, into your lungs, into your eyes, turning each breath heavy, each blink gritty. Sometimes you find yourself sharing a shelter with men you barely know, a quick nod or the exchange of a canteen the only introduction. You band together out of necessity, forging alliances that may last only as long as the next barrage. The rules are simple. Trust the man beside you, cover his back, and hope he does the same. Every day feels like a lifetime, each street crossed, an epic in miniature. What remains of civilian life haunts the ruins, a woman darting from doorway to doorway, a child's cry in the distance, the ghost of laughter drifting from a basement shelter. These brief glimpses are reminders that this was once a living city, that people carved out their days here before it became a battlefield. You carry those memories with you, unsure if they're a comfort or another weight to bear. In this urban inferno, survival is measured by the meter, by the room, by the hour. You learn to move quietly, to wait, to trust your senses and your instincts. There are no front lines, only a shifting web of violence and exhaustion, hope and despair. Each day you make it through is a small miracle, and each night you wonder how many more there will be before the city swallows you too into its endless haunted ruins. War on the Eastern Front never stops redefining itself, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the moments when the enemy you face turns out to be nothing like the stories you were told. One winter day, crouched in the ruined upper floor of a shell-blasted apartment, you catch sight of a Soviet patrol moving along the street below. There's something different about the way they move, their bodies smaller, their faces less weathered. It takes a moment for you to understand. Some of them are hardly more than boys, barely older than the children you once saw in distant villages. Others are women, moving with a determination that leaves no doubt they belong on this battlefield.
The first time you realize your opposite number is a teenage soldier, you hesitate. It's not the enemy you expected, the uniform too large, the helmet sitting awkwardly on a narrow head. You notice a flash of fear in their eyes that mirrors your own, a momentary uncertainty before the training and the will to survive take over. It's gone in an instant, replaced by the harsh, practiced rhythm of combat. The exchange is brief, and afterward you are left with a sense of unease, of boundaries crossed, and expectations upended. You learn, bit by bit, that the Soviet lines are filled with fighters of every age and gender. Teenage boys, sometimes younger than that, run messages through shell fire, take up rifles in the gaps, and hold their ground with a ferocity that defies their size. Young women move with the same resolve, acting as snipers, machine gunners, medics. You hear the crack of a rifle from across a shattered courtyard, and only later discover the shooter was a woman, her skill undeniable, her purpose unshakable. There is no distinction here, no room for the prejudices you may have carried into the war. The enemy adapts, fights, and endures, regardless of age or gender. You hear stories from prisoners, from intercepted letters, about grandmothers carrying ammunition, about schoolchildren digging trenches and laying mines. The Soviet propaganda posters become real in the faces you see through your rifle scope. Women with cold, determined eyes, teenagers covered in mud and frost, their hands just as steady on a weapon as any veterans. It changes the way you think about courage, about sacrifice. The sight of a young woman guiding wounded comrades through the debris, or a boy not yet old enough to shave, shouting orders with a voice made hoarse by smoke, makes the war feel even more surreal. Like the old world has been swept away, and all the old rules with it. You feel the strange weight of recognition, the realization that whatever divides you now is not strength or discipline or training, but simply the chance of which side you were born on. Sometimes, in rare moments when the fighting pauses, you think about the stories these young fighters will tell if they survive, what scars they'll carry home, how they'll remember these streets and faces. Other times, there's no room for thoughts at all, just the immediate, instinctive work of survival. The presence of women and teenagers on the other side becomes one more part of the front's relentless logic. There are no longer any true civilians, only people drawn into the whirlwind, forced to become soldiers by the world that refuses to spare anyone. And in this new reality, every encounter is haunted by a question that lingers, unspoken. If the war can turn children and mothers into warriors, what, in the end, will it turn you into? The answer comes only in fragments, glimpsed in the faces across the ruins, heard in the voices shouting through the smoke, and felt in the uneasy quiet that follows every clash, when the lines between childhood and adulthood, man and woman, victor and vanquished, have all been swept away by the same indifferent tide. There is a different kind of fear that takes hold on the Eastern Front, not just of bullets or shells or the cold, but of simply vanishing, slipping out of existence, without anyone to notice or remember. In the chaos of the fighting, among shifting lines and shattered units, men disappear every day. Sometimes it happens in a moment, a sudden barrage, a patrol that never returns, a comrade there one evening and gone by morning. Other times the process is slower, an injury that pulls someone from the ranks, a growing silence from someone who used to share jokes in the darkness. You keep track of the missing in your mind, even as the days blur together. At first, each absence is a shock. You call out, search the ruins, check the places where wounded are gathered, hoping for a familiar face. But as the war drags on, the list grows longer, and the act of remembering becomes harder, almost painful. Names slip away, stories go unfinished. You realize that the greatest risk isn't dying, but being forgotten, becoming just another unmarked grave, another rumor drifting through the ranks, another line in a report marked missing. Superstitions arise from this fear, shared quietly among soldiers as a way to keep the memory of those lost alive and to ward off their own erasure. Some men keep a scrap of their friend's clothing or a button from a lost comrade's coat, a talisman against disappearance. Others insist on rituals, Never sleep in the same spot twice. Never walk alone at dusk. Always leave a bit of bread uneaten for the souls of the missing. You hear stories of men who light a match before battle for each absent friend, watching the flames flicker and die, believing it offers a small piece of remembrance. Sometimes the uncertainty is worse than any confirmed loss. The word missing carries a weight all its own, leaving open a space where hope and despair wrestle endlessly. Families at home cling to that uncertainty, imagining their sons alive somewhere, captured or wandering, waiting for the war to end. In the trenches, the hope that a lost friend will reappear, a letter, a figure on the road, a voice calling out in the night, keeps you searching even when you know, deep down, that the odds are slim.
The fear of vanishing leaves a mark on how you move through the world. You make an effort to share stories, to pass on nicknames, to keep memories alive. Some nights, huddled around a meager fire, you swap tales about those who are gone. Funny stories, acts of bravery, small kindnesses. It is a way of holding on, of defying the erasure that the war threatens to inflict on everyone. But as the company shrinks, voices grow fewer, and the silence presses in closer, it becomes harder to keep the memories bright. You begin to see yourself in those empty spaces. The idea that you too could disappear without a trace, without anyone to tell your story or mark your passing, becomes an unspoken terror. It makes you more careful, more superstitious, more determined to do something, anything, that might be remembered. You cling to tokens, keep letters close, share your name with anyone who will listen, hoping that if you are lost, someone will remember, someone will carry a piece of you forward. In this world of shifting shadows and endless loss, the fight against forgetting becomes as important as any battle. You strive to leave your mark in small ways, in laughter shared, in acts of friendship, in the rituals that bind the living to the missing. Because in the end, survival is not just a matter of making it through the day, but of ensuring that no matter how the story ends, you are not swallowed whole by the darkness, but remain, in some way, a part of the memory of those who endure. As the campaign grinds on, the thread connecting command to reality grows thinner, almost invisible. Orders arrive from distant headquarters, often disconnected from the chaos and exhaustion on the ground. New officers rotate in, crisp and confident, their uniforms unsullied by mud or blood, their words clipped and sure. They speak of holding lines, of counterattacks and breakthroughs, but the men who have lived through the seasons on the front listen with weary eyes, their belief in easy solutions eroded by bitter experience. It is not just the faces that change, but the very language of leadership. There is a gulf between what is ordered and what is possible, and it widens with every fresh disaster. You find yourself trapped between the demands of distant generals, drawn on clean maps far from the cold and hunger, and the shifting, brutal truth of the trenches and the ruined cities. Sometimes the orders are simply impossible. Defend a village that no longer exists. Push forward when no supplies are left. Hold a position surrounded on 3 sides with only a handful of shells and a ration of hope. Arguments break out behind closed doors, whispered disputes among the officers, quiet grumbling among the ranks. Morale slips further, and the distance between command and reality grows into a chasm. Some new officers try to prove themselves, launching risky attacks or enforcing discipline with a severity that only deepens the resentment of exhausted men. Others keep to themselves, issuing orders and disappearing, more shadow than leader. The veterans trade stories about the latest arrivals, who is reckless, who can be trusted, who has never seen real fighting before. Respect is now earned, not granted by rank, and it is rarely given. Rumors circulate. A favored officer is promoted out of the line after a single week. Another is quietly ignored, his orders lost somewhere between the command post and the front. In the darkness of the shelters, the old talk of miracles, a sudden break in the weather,
unexpected reinforcements, a collapse of the enemy's will. These stories are told with a trace of irony, a desperate humor that masks the knowledge that such miracles are long past. There are no easy escapes now, no last-minute reprieves. The belief in a decisive, saving event has faded, replaced by a grim determination to endure, to make it through one more day, one more night. Sometimes you sense a flicker of hope, a wild rumor of relief or victory, but it vanishes in the morning with the frost. You begin to understand that the front runs not just through the fields and ruins, but through every soldier's mind. The divide between what is expected and what is possible, between belief and resignation. Some cling to rituals, to habits and tokens, inventing their own small miracles in the form of lucky coins, secret prayers, a song sung before every patrol. Others grow silent, retreating into themselves, focusing only on the next task, the next meal, the next step. The reality is that there will be no miracle. The world has become too cold, too hard, too relentless for easy endings. The faith that once carried you forward has been replaced by a stubborn endurance, a silent vow to keep going, not because of orders or hope, but because there is simply nothing else left. Each day, you watch the faces around you, wondering who will hold out, who will break, who will vanish in the machinery of a war that demands so much and gives so little in return. You learn to trust only what you can see, what you can touch, a hot drink, a dry pair of socks, a friend who stands with you in the dark. The gap between the voices on the radio and the world you inhabit becomes a kind of battlefield itself, a place where belief flickers and fades, leaving only the hard, quiet certainty that you must find your own way through, without illusions, and with no expectation of rescue from above. By the end, the war has become something shapeless, a rolling fog that blurs every line, every face, every memory of who you once were. You sense it in the way your own name starts to sound strange, the way stories of home slip from your grasp, replaced by fragments of rumor and ghostly legend passed from one exhausted soldier to another. Out here, on the Eastern Front, it's easy to become a shadow, barely distinct from the ruined landscape itself. You move through the days and nights as if underwater, everything slowed and muted, your thoughts looping endlessly around hunger, fatigue, the next moment of shelter or warmth. Even the men beside you seem to dissolve into the mist, first names forgotten, nicknames swallowed by the static of command and retreat. Conversations drift towards superstition, tales of battalions lost in the forest, of silent snipers who never mess, of comrades who slipped away on patrol and returned changed, silent, unreachable. In the half-light, no one can remember which stories are real and which are inventions, but it hardly matters. The war is a world of half-seen shapes and half-remembered truths. There's a comfort in losing yourself to the collective, a sense of safety perhaps, in knowing you are just one among many, a single thread in the vast and tangled web of the front. The boundaries between your unit and the enemy blur. Uniforms grow ragged and mismatched, languages mix in the darkness, and sometimes, in the confusion of battle or retreat, you can't be sure whether the figure beside you is friend or foe until it's too late. Everyone becomes a silhouette in the fog, driven by the same primal urge to keep moving, keep surviving, keep believing that there is something beyond the next shell-blasted hill. The old rules, the distinctions that once mattered so much, who you are, what you believe, where you belong, fade with each passing day. New myths emerge to fill the gaps. Someone tells the story of a ghost platoon that appears on the eve of disaster, leading lost soldiers to safety. Another swears by the luck of a talisman found in a ruined church, now passed from hand to hand among those who still hope for protection. These tales become the new currency, traded for comfort or courage or simply to fill the long, echoing hours between battles.
Your mind changes too. You learn to suppress memories that hurt, to let go of hopes that drag you down. Emotions flatten, time loses its grip, and you find yourself watching the world as if it belongs to someone else. Some men retreat entirely, their eyes hollow, voices thin and distant. Others cling to rituals, repeating the same motions, the same whispered prayers, as if repetition alone can keep them anchored in a world that no longer obeys any logic but its own. In this fog, the line between survival and surrender becomes razor thin. You do what you must, sometimes without thinking, sometimes without remorse. The person you once were becomes a stranger, someone whose dreams and fears no longer seem relevant. What matters is the next breath, the next meal, the next moment of quiet when you can believe, even for a second, that you are still real. As the war drags on, you come to realize that victory and defeat are just shapes in the mist, as insubstantial as the boundaries between you and the world. What endures is the struggle to hold on to some fragment of yourself, some memory or habit or belief that proves you were more than just a shadow among millions. And when peace finally comes, if it comes, you know that stepping out of the fog will be its own battle, that reclaiming your name and your story will take longer than any retreat across the frozen earth. For now, you march with the others through the endless gray, your past and future lost somewhere in the distance, your present measured by the rhythm of boots on snow and the weight of the fog that wraps around you all, blurring the world until only survival remains.
When the guns finally fall silent and the frozen ground thaws, what remains is not a sense of triumph, but a deep, aching emptiness. The Eastern Front leaves its mark on everyone, soldier and civilian alike, a mark that no medal or story can erase. You limp away, if you are one of the lucky ones, carrying burdens that cannot be measured in wounds or counted in scars. The victory you once dreamed of has become a memory so faded it hardly seems real. The enemy is no longer just the figure across the lines, but the cold, the hunger, the endless march of days and nights that tested every part of you. There is no parade for survival, no song for those who simply endured. What matters in the end is not the flag raised over a ruined city, nor the few lines gained or lost on a map, but the stubborn refusal to give in, to keep moving when every instinct screamed to stop, to hold on to the smallest shreds of dignity and hope when everything around you tried to strip them away. You learn that victory here is measured not by what you take, but by what you manage to hold on to within yourself, a name, a story, a memory of something kind. For some, the front never truly ends. You carry the sounds and sights with you into every silent room and every restless night. The faces of those lost or missing linger at the edge of sleep. You remember the cold more than any battle, the feeling of hunger that made you bargain away your pride, the moments when fear was so deep it felt like a second skin. These are the lessons the land taught you, lessons that shape every day that follows, even when the uniforms are gone and the world insists that peace has returned. No one returns unchanged. The cost is hidden in the eyes of survivors, in the empty houses scattered along the road, in the stories that no one tells. The land itself seems to remember, the scarred forests, the silent villages, the restless ghosts of all who passed through and never left. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that on the Eastern Front there are no winners, only those who endured, those who were lost, and those who remember. The experience cannot be forgotten, nor should it be. To survive was never about glory, never about banners or borders, but about the quiet, stubborn hope that life somehow would continue. And so you step away from the edge, carrying what you can, knowing that the real measure of endurance is not what you did to survive, but the choice to remember, to honor those who vanished, and to never let the world forget what it was like to walk through the endless night and emerge, somehow, into the uncertain dawn.